Hello, everyone, and welcome to EarthStar Talk, episode 15. Today, we will talk about divination and divination protocols and what we can use all to divine messages from our higher self or God source or other higher intelligent beings. Today, my special guest is James D. Girouard, and he has developed a wonderful, very unique method. And he gave me a reading after another show on Arcan Radio, and I was really surprised what he came up with. So give a warm welcome to James. Hello, James.
Hi, Claudia.
Nice to meet you today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to the spirit world. How does it work for you?
Okay, I developed a divination method where you're bypassing the thinking mind and you're tapping into the subconscious. And the subconscious mind is connected to the all-knowing mind, which is the Akashic records.
That's very well put. So how do you do it on your own? And I like your description, by the way, like the subconscious leads to the higher knowledge. It is very true. So explain a little bit, what did you come up with? How do you do it?
Well, it really took me about 3 years to learn how to ask questions. And the reason it took me so long is because, you know, I'm just like everybody else. I'm kind of one-dimensional in my thinking. And I was asking all these really stupid questions, you know, like, am I going to meet the girl? Am I going to win the lottery?
I love it. Sorry
Yeah.
that I interrupt. I love it because in my course, Fast Track to Your Psychic Abilities, I encourage people to ask questions and the right question. But of course, we are human. So what you were asking, you know, the right girl and this and that is, it's human. I love it. So thank you for that. Please continue.
Yeah, I have to be honest about this because, you know, you have to tell it as it is and not try to, you know, sugarcoat it or make it look like something else. So if you want, I could start right from the beginning and kind of tell you where I got the idea.
Yes, please.
Okay, I was living as a Hare Krishna devotee in a temple in Boston. And my service in the temple was answering the phone and opening the door. So every once in a while, someone would come in and they would tell me that they went and saw Amma, the hugging saint.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what they were kind of telling me, sort of an indirect way, was that they weren't getting a personal connection by coming to the temple where they get the philosophy. Okay, so, you know, the reason for that is because the devotees in the temple had a very busy schedule. They just didn't have time to spend a lot of personal time with all the guests that came to the temple. Okay, so what I was thinking was, there's got to be a way that this Krishna conscious philosophy can be delivered to the public in a personal way so that they get the personal connection and the philosophy at the same time.
I love it because personal connection is so important. That's why I do these classes, that people get their own connection and their own uplink and not second-hand knowledge, but their personal uplink to the divine, what they really are.
Yes.
Continue. Fascinating.
Yeah. If when you're dealing with these people, if they know you well and they like you and they trust you, then you can get on to the other things that are beyond that.
Right. So again, you wanted to create a system so that people can uplink to their own divine design, so to speak. So continue. How did you do that?
Okay, so now I had the idea. I had an idea and a desire, but the idea itself wasn't really formed. So then I started watching some videos on the Bible code. And what I found out was that there was a guy who noticed that if he took every 50th letter and put them together, strung it into a word, it spelled the word Torah. Okay, so years later, they found out that there was 5 books in the Bible where you could do that. And they downloaded them into a program and they started selling a CD. It was called the Bible Code CD. and you put the CD into your computer and ask a question, it would tell you your parents' name, where you were born, what year you were born, how many brothers and sisters, who you got married to, how much education, how many children. Your whole entire life was encoded in these 5 books. And I want to explain the rest of the story of this, because it's really interesting.
I have to say, I heard about that long time ago, but I never followed through. And it always fascinated me that something related to the whole universe and creation can be already encoded that way. Fascinating that you bring that up. Thank you for that. That's really interesting. Go ahead.
Okay, so on a certain timeline, which we're not on right now, there was a nuclear war and the whole world was devastated. There was only a handful of survivors. Okay, so like 200 or 300 years in the future from now, they encoded the Akashic records in the form of letters into these 5 books. And then what they did was they traveled back in time and they inserted the 5 books into the Bible. And
very cool. Very cool. I believe in time travel because I experienced it myself in a way, a loophole in time where I gave myself a message and saw myself when I gave myself the message. So I was a recipient and a sender, so there are definitely loopholes in time. I absolutely can attest to that. Fascinating. Please continue. I'm excited. Sorry that I'm interrupting you, but you make a big statement in a tiny little sentence, so I have to expand a little bit on it too, because that's a big statement. Time travel, somebody comes and puts a book in, that's a big deal. So I can only say I can see that such thing can happen. Please.
Yeah. I'm trying to squeeze several years into a sentence here. Okay, so the reason they did this was to prevent nuclear war. So apparently it must have worked because we've been able to avoid it all this time. Okay, so then there was this other video where this research group was trying to prove that the Bible code was a hoax. So what they did was they took Moby Dick, the book Moby Dick.
Yeah.
They ran it into a computer program and they asked questions and they got answers and predictions and everything else. So the idea I got from that video was actually where I got the idea for the dice method, because I realized they didn't prove the Bible code was a hoax. What they proved was that if you had access to thousands of letters, you could ask questions and get answers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I had the idea to making this personal connection with people. So, and now I had the idea to create a divination method, and somehow I would have to get the letters. Okay, so now I thought, well, how do I get the letters? So for some reason, the number 5 kept coming up in my mind. So I headed out on the streets of Boston. I went to 5 stores and I arrived at a CVS, and CVS had a package of 5 dice.
Wow. And
So
the number, I'm getting chills, you know what? Because the number 5 in my book means communication. So you went to the 5 stores and found 5 dice and everything's like, there's communication rating. Fascinating, really fascinating.
It's kind of like a psychic link of spontaneous events that started happening. So I had the 5 dice. I would roll the 5 dice 20 times to get 100 letters. And I had to figure out one by one a letter code with numbers.
Okay. So you first started with the regular dice, like the number dice. Okay.
Right. 1 is A, B is 2, C is 3. Okay, so very time consuming. But I had a system that worked, and I found out that it worked because the sentence I got in the first reading was, ask Joe to aim a hot bid. Now Joe is spelled J-O. It's kind of like a slang word, like he's a good Joe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I knew that the reference of the word Joe was Kevin. At the time this guy Kevin was coming around to the temple, and he was trying to get all the devotees to invest in money in some kind of a scheme on the internet where you could double your money every month. So when I saw Ask Joe to aim a hot bid, I looked up his number and I called him. He was in Florida. When he answered the phone, I said, Kevin, you're not going to believe this. And before I got to tell him what was on my mind, he says to me, I was just thinking about you.
That's how telepathy works beyond time and space.
That's right. It was a telepathic connection with him at that moment on my very first reading. Okay, so now I thought, wow, I got a system. But the system was kind of flawed because I'm using regular dice. So then I thought maybe I could use Scrabble tiles. So I went to a flea market that was run by a friend of mine. And I said, do you have Scrabble? He said, no, I have Boggle. I said, what's Boggle? And he pulled a box out and he showed it to me. And it had 16 dice that had letters on them.
That's amazing.
And so I was like in seventh heaven.
And where did they come from?
It comes from the game Boggle.
Oh, okay. I was not familiar. Thank you.
Yeah, Boggle is another source for people. They can go buy a Boggle game to get the dice to do the dice method. Because right now the Boggle games have 25 dice. They have letters on them. Okay, so now I had 16 dice that have letters. So I'd throw the 16 dice about 8 times, and I would get 120 something letters. And, like I was explaining before, I'm throwing 26 dice 5 times and writing them out like in straight columns. And then once I get my 130 letters, the letters that are next to each other form the words.
Okay, hold on one second. You were saying you need 130 letters. How did you come up with that number?
130 letters is really perfect because if it's less than that, you get less words. But if you have more letters, then you get so many words, it's difficult to put a sentence together.
I hear you.
So 130 letters is actually ideal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good for our new viewers who want to try it out to know. So tell us a little bit how you exactly do it. You said you use 26 dice with the letters and you throw them 5 times, correct? Did I correct? Okay. And then you have 130 letters. And how do you exactly put them together? You sent me after this other radio show a little reading about myself, which was really fascinating because you couldn't have known certain things which came up there. So that's what spontaneously prompted me to invite you today. And I noticed that there was some writing, and then there were these little alphabetical, descriptions, and then some more writing. So how does that exactly work? So you do the dice, and then what?
Okay, the letters are written out in the middle, and then when the letters are next to each other, it starts to form a word. So you can go up at angles, you can go left and right, you can go up and down, you can go in circular fashion, L fashion. As long as the letters are next to each other, you can put the letters together and form what's called an anagram. Okay,
explain to some of the viewers what is an anagram. Maybe the one or the other person doesn't know it.
Okay, an anagram is a random collection of letters that form a word.
Very good. I got it now, because I was wondering what the middle section was meant. And I kind of could see certain things popping out at me. And I must say that certain things popped out which were a little bit different than what you interpreted, but had also very deep meaning to me. So I just wanted to give you that feedback too. There were certain things related to God's source which popped out at me from this middle letter strip. Very fascinating stuff. So please continue. Thank you for letting me interject here and there my observations.
Yeah, you can interject all you like.
Thank you.
Okay, so when you look at it, your interpretation of the meanings of the words is different than mine because you may be looking for something different. Okay, so when I watched your video interview, I started picking up on voice signals, and plus I know what you look like. So I'm getting some images, some impressions in my subconscious mind as to who you are and what you're doing and various things about you just from watching the video. Okay, so the reading that I sent you could have been much better if I had done a palm reading. If you had sent me a photo of each hand and I did a palm reading, I could have gone much deeper into it because the lines on your palm is your life story. Your whole life is written out like a blueprint on your hand. So what I do is I tell people if they want readings or if they want to learn the method, send me a photo of each palm. Let me do a palm reading, and then I'll send you a palm reading, and then we'll talk on Skype or Zoom, and then they can get the dice. And then when they get the dice, they do the dice readings at home and send me the letters, and I decode the letters for them and send them the reading.
Wow. So let me backtrack a little bit. We talked a little bit privately before the show, and you are doing this all for free, right? I
Yeah.
mean, wow. You are paying things forward of the divine light to the people. I think that's very noble of you. Thank you for doing it for this world, to make people aware about who they really are. So to awaken and waken up. And that's what the show is about, to awaken people to their true self. And so where can people, if they're interested, get a reading from you? I know I will send them to your Facebook page, James D. Girouard. And I will make a link, and then they can message you and send you through the messenger the pictures of the palm.
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm sure you will be very busy in the upcoming times.
Okay, so the idea was, once I got this method going, I realized that anybody who wants to access the Akashic code through the Bible code can now do it. I can show them how to do it.
So in that regard, one would have then to get this CD, the Bible code CD, and then
No, don't get the Bible code CD, because the CD doesn't translate Hebrew into English.
I mean, I learned Hebrew because I studied theology in the early years to become a priest, but that was a little bit, smaller box for me. I wanted to be a little bit more wider in my communications and perceptions. And so I allowed myself to do the work this way. But I can speak Hebrew, so it just doesn't translate it into English. It really does it just with Hebrew. Okay, good to know. Thank you for sharing this.
Okay, if you know Hebrew, you could get the CD. It's about $35 now. It would be good for you if you know Hebrew, but that the dice method is direct, because what you're doing is you're holding the dice in your hands. It's picking up the vibrations from your subconscious, and then you're releasing them. And then you're getting all these letters from your subconscious, and the higher self and the all-knowing mind is coming through.
Do you set an intent for this, holding? And I have to say, it's fascinating to me that you're picking up on so many rules and regulations, because when you're emerging you're emanating energy, and when you're holding something, you're emanating your energy into the subject or into the object, and here into the dice. So would it be okay to let's say ask, I want to connect with my father who passed, or so on, because I told a little bit the story about this young lady who had wanting to contact her father through a Ouija board, and then they open up a gateway to something not so funny. So would that be okay with your dice method to communicate with a crossed over loved one that way, or would that not be such a good idea?
It might be a good idea for someone who's been doing the dice method for some time.
Okay.
Okay, if you wanted to do that, I think the first question would be, can the dice method be used to contact a loved one that's passed away?
And then how would we get the yes or the no? With a Y or an M?
No, you would get an entire sentence.
Oh, okay.
And you might also get several entire sentences. Okay, here's what the readings do for you. Like when I throw the dice, I ask the question, what do I need to know next?
And here we are again with the intentions. So your intention is not focused exactly on what you think is important, but what the divine thinks is important for you.
Yes.
Do you have a certain prayer or something what you're doing before you handle the dice and before you use your method?
I don't use it. Sometimes I use the oath, the Green Lantern oath.
Okay. So what would you recommend for our viewers who want to dabble with the dice communication, but they do not know yet how to set their best intention? Would you recommend for them to say something like, here is, I just contact my divine light and I want to know what's important for me to know next, and then throw the dice, or what would you say?
Yeah, a prayer is always good to start off. And, a lot of people are going to do that because it just sets them up to a certain focus and puts them in a certain state of mind before they ask their question.
Very good. So then what comes next? Tell us a little bit more. I'm sorry that I'm disrupting you here and there because I want to understand it and hopefully make it also very clear to the viewers that they do not stumble in anything and then wondering, what did I make wrong? What did I not get? So
yeah, that's a good point, because what happens a lot of times is when I do these interviews and people hear me talking about the dice, they go out and they buy the dice first before they contact me. And that doesn't work good for them because now they're creating expectations. Any kind of expectations that you have about this method is going to ruin it, because what you really need to do is go from one-dimensional thinking to multi-dimensional thinking. That's why when I ask a question, it's what do I need to know next? I leave it wide open.
mm-hmm.
But if your question is one-dimensional, am I going to meet the girl? Am I going to win the lottery? The reading isn't going to say go down to Starbucks at 3 p.m. and she's sitting over in the corner and she's got blonde hair and blue eyes and she's drinking a latte.
I love your analogies. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's what it's going to say is he wants to know if he's going to meet the girl.
I hear you. All right. So it reflects back at you through the dice, so to speak.
It reflects back your thoughts completely. Okay.
That made me also think, because when you gave me the reading, it felt to me almost like the dice were an extended organ of yourself. But you remember I asked you whether you were clairaudient, because it felt to me like you were, as you said, with the interview, you're listening in between the lines, and that's what a clairaudient person does. They listen in between the lines to come to the essence, and then the dice seem to be clarifying or bringing add-on information from that channel of clairaudience for you.
Yes.
But the people do not have to be clairaudient like you to use the dice. They need to just be open. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can be completely non-psychic like I am. Like I am clairaudient, but clairaudient is that you sometimes hear things on a psychic level.
Right.
I'm really more intuitive than I am psychic.
Well, we all have the different four psychic senses, whether we know about them or not, whether we consciously use them or not. Most of us use them not really in a conscious manner, but it's good to point them out. So, for example, you use your intuition, this sensing, that's great. But I just noticed that you must have been a clairaudient too, how the message came about in your reading. So thank you for validating that. Now let's continue So when people should contact you before they buy and run and get some dice, send the palm to see what's going on. So it gives you like a parameter of the person. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Doing a palm reading is almost as good as meeting someone in person.
Mhm.
So it gives me a lot of reference points about the nature of that person that I can fall back on when I start decoding their letters.
I have one personal question there. I noticed in my hands, I'm not a palm reader. I do not know how that works and what it means. So just upfront, but I noticed that some lines in my hand have completely changed. And I noticed I had an eye of Horus in my right palm, very big, and that's shifting to a rune. So totally different concept in that area of my palm. How can that be? How can the lines in the palm change so much? And what would you say to that?
Okay, your timeline was heading a certain direction. And by will of choice and by desire, you changed the lines in your hand. You changed your destiny.
Then you would say inadvertently that we have destiny and then we have free will. Certain destiny things we cannot change, but free will can bring us into a different path.
Yes.
Okay, I got that. All right.
Yeah, there's always a certain amount of flexibility or room to move around in when it comes to the future destiny of a person. There is such thing as predestination, which is fixed, but it's
Right.
actually both. It's fixed in one area, and the other area is we have room to move around through free will and change it according to what you want.
Very good point. Thank you for explaining that. Wow, this interview goes all over the place. I love it. I mean, I could talk with you for hours. That's fascinating. So okay, go ahead.
I want to tell you about Nora before I forget.
Sure.
Okay, Nora was living in Europe, and I taught her the dice method. I even sent her a package in the mail with 26 dice, and it arrived there in 3 days.
Wow, that's amazing. That wouldn't happen these days.
Well, it happened then. It was only about a year or so ago. Okay, so once she learned the dice method, she did a reading, and the reading said, Ferguson knows the way. So she found out who Ferguson was living in Mexico at the time, traveled to Oregon where he lives, and she married him.
Wow, I'm getting chills again. That's just, when my hair on my arms raise up, I know Spirit puts an emphasis on this. So that was important. So you can really get valid answers for your life, and they can take you totally by surprise. Wow, cool.
Okay,
Cool.
let me tell you about the Sedona story. Dr. Patrick Flanagan, I had found out about him from watching some videos. In his earlier years, he was quite famous and wrote a book called Pyramid Power, and he did some research with clusters and kind of knew who he was. So I decided to do a reading, and in the reading that I sent him, it said, Porsche goes over the cliff. Okay. So when I looked at that, I didn't know what it meant. And I kind of debated in my mind, should I send it? But then I thought, well, if I don't send it, I won't find out if it means something to him. So I sent him the reading and he read it. And then 3 days later, he woke up and he realized he had a friend named Alex who was in a Porsche that went over a cliff.
Wow. So this friend gave him inadvertently a message through you that he was contacting him or that he was close. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Amazing. Thank you for sharing this.
So he called me on Skype and he said, my guides are guiding you to send me messages through the reading.
Very fascinating.
Okay,
well,
so I want to tell you the rest of the story about
sure.
Alex. Alex was in a Porsche, lost control, went over the cliff, and he's heading down in the air by himself in the Porsche. Sai Baba appeared to him and embraced him, and the car crashed, was totally demolished, and he walked away without a scratch.
Wow, divine intervention at its best.
Right. So you know, Patrick Flanagan, I think, you know, being the reincarnation of Nikola Tesla, I think he must have remembered me as being someone during the time of Tesla who was his assistant.
Very fascinating. I definitely believe that we have soul clusters or soul family, and that we incarnate over and over in different constellations and give us different hints or learning lessons. In this case, it was definitely a hint. Very fascinating. So
Okay.
tell us a little bit more about the reading. So you want then the people who are interested send you the palm pictures, and then you will interpret this, and then what comes next?
Okay, so what happened was he set up a free lecture in Sedona in 2012. And the lecture was right before my birthday. The lecture was on September 14th, and my birthday was the next day. Okay, so 7 weeks before the lecture, I did a reading and asked the question, who am I going to meet when I do this lecture? I got the name Christy. Okay, so when I gave the lecture, I stood out in the middle of the crowd and I said, is Christy here? She's sitting right in front of me, waving her hand. I'm Christy. So I was saying to her, well, I came here from Massachusetts to meet you. Okay, so I gave her the dice. I had this great big piece of cardboard, and she rolled the dice, and I wrote out the letters in a black magic marker on this big piece of cardboard so everybody could see the letters. And when we decoded the letters, it said Aries, Dragon, Adopted, Zorro. So she looked at me and she said, my sign is Aries. I was adopted, and I was born in the year of the dragon.
Wow, that gives me chills again. So,
okay, so then I said to her, what does Zorro mean? And she said, my husband dressed up as Zorro at a party.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay, so I took the piece of cardboard and I turned around and I showed it to the 25 people that were there. And it was like an explosion of interest. I mean, I couldn't handle what was happening at that point because so many people were like approaching me and saying things and asking me questions. And at that point, we had to leave, so everything kind of started with this explosion that happened in Sedona.
Well, and here we are again. I'm in Sedona and you are in Massachusetts, and we are now bridged with the internet and the recording here. And I think there might be another explosion coming your way with questions and readings. And I'm excited to give this opportunity to the viewers. And I'm excited myself because you were really saying some interesting things. And to your honor, I'm wearing the opal earrings today because I know with opal you can open your third eye and utilizing crystals for certain purposes. And you picked up on that big time in your reading. Very fascinating. So what else would you like to share with us? So you do the palm and then you send the information back over in regards to the person, and then you tell them, get the dice, and we will have a link where one can get these particular dice, right? And then I couldn't believe it when you said the Campbell soup dice. I had to look it up, and lo and behold, there is on Amazon, you can find Campbell soup dice. Yes. And so you tell them to take how many, 26 out of those? Randomly, you said they were 30, you take 26 out of the 36 dice, right? How do you make a choice which 26 dice you're taking?
Okay, the letters that I like to choose as my favorite are D, C, I, E, and O, because those letters spell out dice code. Okay,
Makes sense.
Okay, so when you do a reading, you want to look for certain keywords, like if it says dice code, you want to find out what the dice code is telling you. So you look for the word tell or the word telling. So now you've got dice code is telling me, and then look for what it's telling you.
Very cool. So you let them have them hold in their hands, and then let them loose as you described in the very beginning of our interview. And then they should write the letters down and send them to you again through Messenger, and then you will help them decode it.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to see some feedback, folks. If you send Mr. Girouard your reading request, and let us know how it went for you. I'm very excited about this method because in the other Arcane radio show, we were talking about, pendulum, but some people believe that when they use the pendulum, they influence it too much. I can influence kinesthetically their pendulum to my liking if I want to, very easily. So sometimes that might not be a good method. Then there's this body method, moving forward, moving backward, Ouija board, that should be a no. Tarot cards, sure, but make sure which ones are really good for you and, to test before you buy. But this dice method is really totally new for me and fascinating. Even an old fox learns new tricks. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else? Let's say, do you have a particular message for the viewers in regard of the upcoming times? Because you in your Facebook page have written a lot. And to me, it makes perfect sense. But to some people who might not be familiar with a bigger multidimensional picture, are maybe a little bit skeptical. So is there anything which comes to mind or is downloaded to you right now? What might be important for their viewers to know?
Well, I'm here to tell them that they can get all the answers to these questions through the dice method.
Okay. And are you ever teaching an online class for people? Because you did a free lecture there and we are trying to explain certain things here, but I'm sure there are more details which need to be explained. Do you ever do an online class?
No, I don't do it that way. I do it one-on-one, one person at a time on Skype or Zoom. But if they want to do it through email back and forth with no video chat, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, so you want to do it with video chat. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, it has to be through video chat where I'm talking to them and explaining to them. Because what they're going to start thinking in the very beginning is that the dice method is all about getting the dice and throwing the dice and getting the answers. But what it's really all about is going from one-dimensional thinking to multi-dimensional thinking. And if they know what that is already, that's fine. But if they don't know what that is, I mean, it took me 3 years to master it and to figure out, multi-dimensional thinking is the way to go with this, because now what I do is I either don't ask a question or I ask the question, what do I need to know next?
Right. Well, multidimensional thinking is hard to digest for many people because we are so taught we are born and then we die and then we're not sure where we're going, and not really understanding that we are already so many different things and it's all happening at the same time. The different life experience all happening at the same time, and sometimes other lifetimes bleed into this lives, and we have, let's say, phobias which have not been sponsored in this life but have been sponsored in a different life, or certain inner knowledge or which has been sponsored from other lifetimes, which we do not 100% and fully remember. But one thing I can assure every listener, that we are a divine being having a human experience, And sometimes we need to step aside and watch our life here and then come back in, but with a not judgmental perspective, because only the non-judgmental perspective leads us to the full understanding. And in that said, I would say, before you judge this method, try it out and contact Mr. James Girouard through his Facebook page. And thank you so much for coming today. Do you have any last words which is important for the viewers to know?
Yes, I'd like to say that the original desire that I had when I was in the temple opening the door and people telling me they were seeing the hugging saint, that I've actually been able to complete the idea of having a method where I can personally connect with people and give them what they're looking for in a personal perspective. And then later, if they want to know about Krishna consciousness, they can ask me questions. But if they don't want to know about it, I'm not going to preach to them.
That is very kind. And that's exactly why I didn't become a priest in that sense, because I didn't want to preach my belief structure onto others. Everybody needs to, go through their own evolution and realize what's the truth, one level at a time, one step at a time. So thank you for being so open. And even though you have your beliefs, not superimposing them onto others, I try to do the same. And thank you so much for coming. And I hope we will see each other again on another show. You have so much to share. I was delighted. Please contact James Girouard and get your reading. Have a wonderful day, folks. Bye-bye.